I think I mentioned last week too that if I have a specific goal for this program for this period of time, I guess I would say to be you could say the voice of Medicare for all on radio and TV, or the voice of something bigger and better than Medicare for all, because Medicare for all is a great vision, but we're always going to need to be improving and refining what we do in the area of health. Our next guest is great in this topic. I always enjoy talking to him. Timothy Faust is an advocate for a single-payer healthcare system. He's a member of Democratic Socialists of America. He goes around the country talking about single-payer. If I recall correctly, he's getting a master's or has gotten an MPP or something like that in public policy related to health policy. And he's got a book coming out that I'm looking forward to reading. It comes out in August. It's called Health Justice Now. So I thought it would be a great time to catch up with Tim with the new bills coming out. So first of all, Timothy Faust, thanks for coming back on the program.
Hi, RJ. Thanks for having me. Fun to be back.
Oh, it's always great to have you. So, not too many heavy metal folks are also single payer advocates that I know of. So it's good synchronicity. So let's start with this. We got Pramila Jayapal's bill, Representative Jayapal, with more than 100 co-sponsors, which to me is mind-blowing considering where Medicare for All was at in Congress as a proposal a couple, 3 years ago. So we've got a new Medicare for All bill out there. You've been diving deep into this issue for a long time now. What's your reaction to the Jayapal bill?
It's the first good single-payer bill of the contemporary era. It ticks off it's a astonishingly strong bill, I think. I think it ticks off all my boxes for what single-payer can and must be. It doesn't do everything. There's a lot of gaps still, a lot of things I'd like to see resolved, but it finally gets the fundamentals right. It does it much better than I think Sanders' old bill, and I like the process by which it was written. I like the coalition that was that assembled to write the bill. But of course, bills aren't enough. You can't eat a bill. A bill won't actually cover your healthcare costs. So still a lot more to do. I don't think complacency around Jayapal's bill makes sense, but it's a good bill, and it's finally a bill I can point to and say, yeah, that's single payer.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, but I guess let's start with this. Let's start with what's good about it. What's a step forward from what we've seen before?
Sure. Well, first and foremost is the inclusion of long-term support and services and home and community-based services for older folks and people with disabilities. That was relegated to Medicaid under Sanders' bill. As of a closed-door conference in January, it's still going to be relegated to Medicaid in the new Sanders bill, though I've heard that might be changing. And that's fundamentally unacceptable on any kind of like a moral or any kind of moral level or any kind of sense of integrity. Long-term care is where some of the most pernicious harms happen in private health care. It's a place for a person with disabilities to go to die, basically. They're warehouses, not caregiving facilities. And so to leave people at the discretion of conservative or reactionary state agents instead of a guaranteed federal payment for home-based care is unacceptable.
Then you'll be pleased to know we're doing an entire segment on this week's program just on long-term support and services.
Oh, awesome!
So yeah, we think that's a big deal too. So
awesome.
What else?
Things it does right. That was the big change for me from Bernie. That and global budgeting. I found that I like global budgeting. I think it's good. I understand that some critics of the bill, and I think this is a good conversation to have, don't agree with removing the prohibition on for-profit providers that Sanders' bill had. I think that the global budget with the restrictions on what funds can be used for, that is, if you receive money from the single payer, you can't spend it on profit, marketing, advertising, or campaign donations or union busting. I think that places a pretty tight stranglehold around
Yeah.
around providers. Fundamentally, like no single payer bill will make healthcare not a commodity, right? That's beyond the scope of a single payer bill or any bill. I think giving a single payer the tools to really grapple with the problem of for-profit provision is a good first step.
Yeah, and let me give you my thoughts on that. And I was privy to some of the discussions kind of orbiting the writing of this bill, if not directly involved. I guess where I come down on it, but I want your thoughts on it too, is that while it does not prohibit profit-making entities from being a part of this system, I think it's structured in such a way, might get in trouble here, but Lenin talked about the withering away of the state. I think it leads inevitably to a withering away of the for-profit sector in healthcare, because there's really no reason for capital to be involved in the delivery of healthcare if it can't take profits from it. And since it's the profit taking itself that's immoral, I guess I get the political logic between structuring it this way, but I'm wondering if you have a different thought about it.
No, that's similar. I think whatever you can do to make it most easy to, I think ultimately you need to nationalize these industries, and this puts some cobblestones in the road to maybe one day realize that. But no, I agree. If this makes it less appealing for capital to get involved in the private provision of healthcare, then I think that's great.
Yeah, okay, then I think we're on the same in the same place on that as well. One of the things that I think the Sanders bill did as well, but the Jayapal bill does and spells out, is it eliminates copayments and deductibles.
Yep.
And that to me is a big deal, but it's also getting pushback from the centrists, whatever you want to call them. They're not really politically in the center if you look at the polls, but the establishment figures, however you want to characterize them, I think it's getting pushback from people who are saying, well, no other country completely eliminates copayments and deductibles. So I'm curious whether A, if that's completely true. I know most other countries have some form of copays or deductibles. And B, what your thought is on how to respond to that.
So I understand the argument for some forms of copays and cost sharing. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. And a good example is if you have two drugs and one's a generic and costs $1 and one's a name brand and costs $100, maybe you put a copay on the name brand to incentivize folks to go with the cheaper one. If they can pick of the two indiscriminately, it'll be just very expensive or whatever. Right? That's the hypothetical scenario. And in that circumstance, I guess I understand having a low copay. But fundamentally, cost sharing is a regressive tax. It's a cost for being sick that's most directly affects people who have who have less money. And I'm not interested in including that in my vision of a healthcare model. I think a lot of the problems of we understand that American healthcare utilization isn't higher than other countries, right? We have higher utilization and high cost, low value procedures, but we have low utilization across emergency room and basic primary care procedures. So I don't think we're going to see a run on the banks if we remove copays. I think our actual problems of cost come from unit costs. Actually, this is pretty widely regarded as being just a basic truth. Our costs are high because our prices are high. And so that's the fretting over do we have copays, this is inconceivable or whatever, I guess neglects to mention two things. One, I don't think we're trying to build a single payer that's as good as other ones. I think we're trying to build the best one possible. I think we certainly can bear out having no copays or starting with no copays. And two, the actual problems we need to solve around cost don't happen in utilization, they happen in unit costs. And that is, once again, a corporate and for-profit institution we got to battle with.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said there, Tim. And again, we're talking with Timothy Faust about Medicare for All. And I would add to it, as you know, and I was part of the health economics and health insurance world when this was received wisdom, there is incorrect received wisdom. There was a Rand Corporation study, for example, several decades back that seemed to suggest that that if you introduced cost sharing into employee benefit health insurance plans, that it would cut down on unnecessary use of medical services, that's pretty much been discredited.
And yeah,
And even that study showed that it also caused people not to use needed medical services. So there's no scenario under which copays and deductibles don't discriminate against people who aren't wealthy. For example, we had that case of that teacher who died recently because she couldn't afford the $120 for antibiotics. So there's no scenario under which people don't suffer and die if you have copays and deductibles. So what sort of abstruse theory or ideological attachment would lead us to be so divorced from humanity to introduce them if we have done the research economically, and we don't have to have them, so why have them? I guess that's what I would add to.
we maintain this belief, this specious belief that humans are rational consumers in the healthcare marketplace. That like we understand what is necessary and unnecessary care, and like shop around. And that's, as you've mentioned in the RAND study and dozens of times since, been proven false. We just don't really know what we need. We go to the doctor when we think we can, if we can afford it. Like, yeah, no one, like, humans don't know what their own low value care is, and they're not the ones you target. Patients aren't the people you target to try to reduce it or whatever. That just ends up inflicting a bunch of like discredit. Like, people then just don't seek healthcare whatsoever, just like you said. And that's clearly a suboptimal and I think immoral state of affairs.
And you're the only other person I know besides myself that uses the word suboptimal in daily conversation. But by the way, and I've mentioned this on the program before, but in this context, it's perfect. I'm pretty informed, reasonably informed on the subject. I recently had minor surgery. I was in terrible pain. Just out of curiosity, I went to my insurer's website to see what they said about it. And the two things were, ask your doctor whether there are lower cost alternatives, like you're going to do that when you're double over in pain. And the other was ask your doctor how much it's going to cost.
Right,
So,
and like they know.
like they know. So I did, just to play it out, right? This smart shopper scenario, because I hate it so much in healthcare. I thought I'll play the game. I asked my doctor, how much do you think it will cost? And he said, talk to my office staff. I went to the office staff. I said, how much do you think it will cost? He said, we don't know. Talk to the hospital. I went to the hospital. I said, how much do you think it will cost? They said, ask your doctor. So this is like a reasonably informed guy couldn't get an answer. And by the way, I got a hefty four-figure bill for that, even though I supposedly had quote unquote good employer-based insurance. So that's the system we got now. That's the system we want to get rid of. Now, at this moment in time, we're waiting for the Bernie Sanders bill to drop. There's going to be more debate, more discussion about that. We're going to have an interminably long, in my opinion, presidential primary and election process. But hopefully, at least in that process, Medicare for All will be healthily debated on the Democratic side, because we've got a couple candidates, several candidates who say they support it, and certainly Bernie Sanders says. Any thoughts on how you think the debate should ideally go in the next few months?
I'm of two minds. On one mind, I think support in general will increase. I think Sanders will do a lot for that. But also, I'm personally more interested in local elections and municipal elections in 2019 for the rest of this year, right? Like, I think even if Sanders is elected president tomorrow, or another socialist president or whatever, he or she can't pass Medicare for all, certainly not good Medicare for all, by him or herself. It requires like an actual national movement. And I don't think Medicare for all is the kind of thing that can pass with like a single, like, vertical, I guess you could say, national movement. I don't think it works that way. I think there's so many obstacles to it in like the local level, a bad judge, a bad city actor, a Medicaid agency, whatever. But it requires like this big kind of jumbled quilt of local movements for health justice that kind of like fold upon themselves into a Medicare for all movement. I think a good example of that might be, for example, Medicaid expansion in Idaho, a citizen initiative that won overwhelmingly with very little money because it campaigned on a simple moral message and a simple economic message and rallied 61% of Idahoans, not a liberal people, onto its side. And now from that, you can kind of build a scaffolding, which by the same logic that won Medicaid expansion, Medicare for all, can also be argued. I think that's more interesting to me than the national debate because we know what's going to happen. No one on like the national level is going to change their mind unless they're forced to change their mind, right? Like CAP will put out another bill, it'll be awful. We'll have like another like conservative response that'll be entirely nonsensical, leaving the body of its own text. Another Dem will put out Medicare extra buy-in program or whatever. Like it'll all be the same. I think we have now one bill that's very, very good. We might have two bills when Sanders just comes out, and like those are good things to point to and say that's single payer. But I think the real utility of that is on the ground organizing, local organizing. I think for local issues and local material reform, and then building that upward into a single payer movement.
Well, that's really consistent with the way I view the world, so I really like that answer. And I do think we have to be really vigilant about these kinds of proposals that try to look like Medicare for all, or as I call them, Medicare for almost everyone. I think it's going to be a very interesting year for health advocacy in general. So thanks for your great work in this area, Timothy Faust, and we look forward to reading your book and hopefully talking with you about it. And thanks for coming on the program.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. Talk soon.
You bet.